As the Miami Dolphins continue to keep a watchful eye on the cornerback market, at least one free agent corner's dad appears to be doing the same for the Dolphins. And let's just say Asante Samuel Sr. does not seem like a fan of Miami.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Surprisingly, a lot of storylines for a Monday in the first week of July that we could get into here on a show. Decided to take a couple of them, including ESPN released the first of their NFL coach executive poll series looking at top 10 running backs in the NFL. We're going to check in on how Devon Achane did. We have a story from Drew Rosenhaus, Darren Waller's agent, about the catalyst of Darren Waller unretiring. Going to get into that. And we're going to start with an update in the Dolphins search for a veteran corner to add to the room. And this update has nothing to do with any player that is eligible to sign a contract, although technically this player could unretire, but it's been a minute, but was a very successful player in his own right. Asante Samuel Sr., Asante Samuel Jr. being the corner from the Chargers, who, when healthy, is a very talented option, but has a shoulder/neck thing that he's trying to work through to get medical clearance so that he can sign with the team and play in 2025. That's Asante Samuel Jr. Asante Samuel Sr., former NFL cornerback, he who recently this past year mixed it up with Deion Sanders about back pedals and T-steps and as defensive backs. On a podcast appearance, I would be putting it lightly to say that he ripped the Dolphins. Very unflattering comments about the Dolphins, their leadership, their front office, and the trade of Jalen Ramsey. Asante Samuel Jr. on the What Needs to Be Said podcast said Jalen Ramsey will make the Steelers defense a better defense. The Dolphins had no reason to trade him other than that they were sensitive. He would go on to call Mike McDaniel a pushover, say Chris Greer has no backbone, says that the Dolphins are running their organization like a little league team. And I think it's fair to, especially with what the Dolphins season was last year and how they approached contract negotiations and who got contracts and how those players performed and kind of the hot seat nature that you're in and what the Dolphins are trying to do this offseason. I think it's fair to look at the Dolphins operation and have some critiques and it is maybe a little fully throated, but it's you can question what the leadership has been and how the player the gravity of player relations within the team, has it gone too far, right? Versus the coach ultimately nipping things before they go too far, or keeping everybody moving in the same direction. And I think that's part of the maturation process that we're going to find out a lot about for Mike McDaniel this year as the head coach of the football team. But some of that has to start with making changes when players are too far gone. And, as talented as Jalen Ramsey is, and he's still, for my money, a top 10, top 12 corner in football. But when even those who are the avid supporters of Jalen Ramsey and his cause in the build-up to him getting traded are saying, was he one of the ones that was frequently late for meetings? Yeah, but then you kind of know you got a problem. when all of the arguments like, yeah, that thing that they're taking exception to, yeah, that's true, but he's still really good. And I think you have started to reach the point for Jalen Ramsey where paying him moving forward, you better be sure that you're going to get the best version of Jalen Ramsey. And that obviously didn't happen. And Jalen's done this to other teams. The Dolphins are not the first team that Jalen Ramsey has thrown his hands up and said, you know what? Not for me. I'm going to go play somewhere else, because I think I could get more money, and I think they'll give me a better chance to put myself directly in the conversation, the spotlight on an annual basis. Right. And you're talented enough. There will always be a place for willing to take on your services until Jalen decides it's your turn to be the next that he transitions from. So I wouldn't say that the Dolphins had no reason to trade him other than that they were sensitive. I think if the Dolphins are serious about addressing their problems, finding the right veterans to be a part of the room, and then going younger to have players that are more, you can have buy into your version and your way of doing things, is very much a reason, and not just, well, your way of doing things is sensitive. I don't think that's the case, especially with Ramsey as an aging player. This is also the same guy. I got a lot of respect for Asante Samuel Sr. as a football player. He's also the same guy that said Chris Carter was like the most overrated wide receiver in the NFL. He said, quote, all he did was catch touchdowns. Yeah, he caught 130 of them. It's like fourth best number of all time. I don't know if that's the tree I'd go barking up for, like an overrated player, right? So Asante Samuel Sr. has some really strong opinions, and it works, right? Because I'm on my podcast talking about what he said on a podcast, and I gave you the name of the podcast. So if you like it, you'd be like, oh, I want to go hear Asante Samuel Sr. rip the Dolphins a new one. Yeah, you'll go do that, and that achieves what Asante was probably hoping when he says all this stuff with his chest. And that's the nature of the beast, and that's how new media works, and YouTube media and podcast media. I get it. And he got me hook, line, and sinker, because here we are on a Monday talking about. But we're talking about because it is particularly relevant to Pops doesn't seem like a fan, and Asante Samuel Jr.'s one of the prominent free agent corners that is still available to sign in free agency. And presumably we are reaching the point in which he will be medically cleared and could sign at any point. So if you think that makes it harder for the Dolphins to sign Asante Samuel Jr., then you know why. If they go a different direction, or if they wanted them and it's reported that he goes somewhere else, you'll know why. Because his old man didn't have some very positive feedback on the way that the Dolphins do things. But the Dolphins did close on a transaction or are closing, I should say. This trade's not formally announced, I don't believe, on a new player acquisition, and that's for tight end Darren Waller, who unretired to play in Miami. We're going to talk about what Drew Rosenhaus in an appearance on with the Maz, Josh Moser, what he had to say, what Drew Rosenhaus had to say about how this whole thing started. That's next year on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Have you ever decided last minute to head to the ball game with family or friends? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the seats. It's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it all possible. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Prices on the app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch, or tip-off, or kickoff, or puck drop, or whatever. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, including clear seat views, lowest price guarantee that take the worrying out of buying tickets. It's also not just sports. There's concerts, comedy, theater, more. All the venues near you. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and download the Gametime app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets with the lowest prices guaranteed. So the Dolphins, and shout out to Josh Moser for the interview that he does every week with Drew Rosenhaus. There's usually some great insight here. And Drew's a guy who obviously NFL super agent. I know there's some disenfranchised Dolphins fans with the way that some of Drew's clientele have had their tenures go. and you just sit there and you roll your eyes with Drew chiming in, and the feedback that you get from Drew about his clients going to Miami, whether it's Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith himself. Now you get Darren Waller coming in. But I'll say this for Drew Rosenhaus, and you can contrast this to a number of the other agencies that are out there. What I do appreciate with Rosenhaus is he's always willing to play ball. He's always willing to find a way for, if you help me with this player negotiation, we'll push something through, whether that's Emmanuel Ogbah signing in Jacksonville and signing before 4 p.m. on Monday of the compensatory pick trade deadline window to give the Dolphins an extra buffer. Whether that's some of the clients that he has had that have not gone for new contracts or ultimately played, or him in this case, helping to facilitate the Dolphins getting a replacement for Jonnu Smith after they decided they weren't going to pay Jonnu Smith. I would much rather play in the sandbox with somebody who will at least keep score, and when it's your turn to get something instead of give something, he'll help you get something, right? And there's some other agencies out there that are really cutthroat with how they do things for their clients. And I think the way that Drew Rosenhaus seems to operate, from what I've seen with Rosenhaus Sports and Drew, is he looks out for his clients, but he also understands and produces value for the teams that he's doing business with as well, because that relationship is obviously important to helping you work to find compromises and get what you want. And sometimes a player's not going to give a player what they want, and you rep the player. So, okay, let's find a trade. And then you get traded to Pittsburgh and get a 1-year, $12 million extension. But Rosenhaus in this interview, talking about Darren Waller, was asked about how it all came up, and he likens it to Rob Gronkowski coming out of retirement and telling Drew, I'm coming out of retirement, but I want to play for the Bucs. He said the situation was kind of like that. Here's what Drew Rosenhaus had to say about Darren Waller coming out of retirement. I got a phone call last Friday, the last week of June, from Darren. And he said, Drew, I've decided I want to play football again. I miss football. I have the itch to play. The love for the game is back, and I would like to play for the Miami Dolphins. He continues to say, to Joe Shane's credit and Chris Greer's credit, those two quickly got together and worked out a deal compensation-wise. For the Dolphins, this was terrific timing after losing Jonnu Smith. To add Darren Waller to the mix was really fortunate. Those are big shoes to fill, with Jonnu being part of that trade to the Steelers. We'll see how ready Darren is to fill those shoes. I think it's only fair to judge Darren Waller's acquisition when you get on the field. And somebody who was a part of one of the Discord channels that I am in pointed out, this could be the next Odell Beckham, but it also could not be. And we should know earlier, because we didn't see Odell for training camp, right? Odell signed in the summer and he kind of floated along. And I remember going to training camp and he's on the far field, or he's inside and he's just jogging 60-yard gassers or 60-yard wind sprints. And that was work for the day for Odell Beckham. The entirety of the 2 weeks of training camp I was there, that was the work that Odell did. So I think it's a very valid point to say, I would hope, with what some of the points of emphasis have been for the Dolphins this year, and we talked about the training camp schedule and earlier practice days and what that means for intensity and getting guys to practice more, and Tyreek last year said he didn't practice enough, etc., 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 etc. I would hope you're not going to bring Darren Waller in here and operate with kid gloves, right? You want to play football? Okay, let's go. Let's find out real fast. And hopefully that evaluation opportunity, I will be down for camp early in the summer. I'm looking forward to kind of assessing where Darren Waller's at on that spectrum. Now, I think from Drew's perspective, as Darren's agent, I would not expect him to say anything other than very fortunate and terrific timing that they can add Waller and filling the big shoes of Jonnu. And I did a film study on Sunday, yesterday, that looked at Darren Waller with the Raiders with Frank Smith, and then in 23 with the Giants, and his role as both a receiver and a blocker, and how it compares to Jonnu Smith. And then we looked at some Jonnu Smith. It's about 50 minutes. It's really good. It's on Substack, Touchdown Miami. Just like I would expect Drew Rosenhaus as the agent to say, my client is this is a good thing that you got my client. You surely would expect me to say the same thing about my own video film study content. That it's great and it's good stuff. You should check it out, right? But I'll let you be the judge for yourself, just like we need to be the judge once we see the actual content of Darren Waller on the field for himself. But at least according to Drew Rosenhaus, this was a Darren Waller decision. Now, I hope that is the story here, and that, it seemed, at least from me, that maybe the Dolphins didn't want to finalize and formalize a transaction with Jonnu Smith one way or another until they had a plan in place at that position. And maybe this being the first catalyst helped everything else also happen. It's hard to say because there's so many layers that was tied in with the Ramsey situation and his trade. And Drew Rosenhaus also said, I don't think the Ramsey trade gets done unless Jonnu Smith's a part of the trade. But did the Dolphins want to make any moves with Jonnu Smith until they knew what they were doing? You know what I mean? There's a lot of balls in the air here. And it really only underscores for the Dolphins and their summer plan, it's only just beginning. They still have more work to do. And that includes with potentially restructuring some contracts and so on and so forth. We're going to finish with ESPN. They did their annual poll of, over 70 executives across the league. And their objective to come up with a top 10 list at each position. They have that curated at the running back position. And we're going to see where Devon Achane checks in and anything that may or may not have been said about Devon Achane. That's next. Stick with us. All right. This story runs courtesy of Jeremy Fowler. Here is the nuts and bolts of the story. This dropped at 6 a.m. this morning on ESPN. ESPN surveyed league executives, coaches, and scouts to rank the top 10 players at 11 different positions from quarterback to cornerback. Of course, you picked those two. And all positions in between. 6th edition of the rankings. Several players moved up or fell down off of each year's list. The process, voters gave their 10 best players at a position, then compiled the results and ranked candidates based on the number of top 10 votes, composite average, and dozens of interviews with Matt Bowen from ESPN, who's just phenomenal, one of my favorite human beings in the space, also contributing. More than 70 voters submitted a ballot on at least one position, and in many cases, all positions. So here we go, running backs. Usually I am team not do the whole thing and reveal all the content, but this is a publicly available article on ESPN, so I'm going to read the 10, including where Devon Achane's name shows up, because it is included in some way, shape, or form on this list. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, top 2. Should not be surprising. Jahmyr Gibbs ranked 3. Bijan Robinson 4. Interesting to me that Jahmyr Gibbs did not get a first place vote, but Bijan Robinson did. But somebody did not rank Bijan Robinson as amongst the 10 best running backs in the NFL, to which I would say, yeah, I would hope you're working for a fellow NFC South team and it's just sour grapes. Christian McCaffrey, 5. Josh Jacobs, 6. Jonathan Taylor, 7. James Cook, 8. Joe Mixon, 9. Alvin Kamara, 10. Devon Achane technically finishes 13th on this list, behind also those 10 and Bucky Irving and Aaron Jones. Here was the quote attributed to an, quote, AFC executive on Devon Achane. Elite speed and explosion, could wear down because he's small. Similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, he just gets banged up. Runs very hard for how small he is and should get out on the perimeter more as a pass catcher. I think the Dolphins obviously have had their successes in the passing game with Devon Achane, and that's an area I'd like to continue to see them probe and explore. And I would expect some of the Jonnu Smith workload, 100-plus target, 110-plus targets. I would expect some more of that gets spread to Devon Achane. Hopefully with the carry load staying the same or slightly going down for wear and tear purposes to not put him in high traffic spots. He beats out the following running backs who also got votes: Breece Hall, Jets; James Conner, Cardinals; Kyron Williams, David Montgomery, Brian Robinson Jr., Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker. All received votes, finished behind Devon Achane. I think from a production standpoint, I understand why Achane is where he is on this list. And the bigger workload led to a less efficient style player, some of that being the offensive line. I've mentioned several times this offseason the name Alvin Kamara is I think that's the right place from a role and utilization standpoint to aspire for Devon Achane, because I think that's the pathway to him having the best durability as an NFL player and being an impactful NFL player. Kamara ranked 10th. His highest ranking was 7th. I think Joe Mixon's a descending player. Christian McCaffrey obviously was super banged up last year. Kamara, 29, is somewhat of a descending player, but still has really good versatile skill sets. Aaron Jones is a age 30 running back. So if Achane plays probably similar touches, maybe a little bit more skewed to the passing game, I could see him pushing for 9-10 on this list next year. But that's dependent on the Dolphins line performing at a super high level. That's not even a super high level, just not a super low level, I should say. Achane himself performing at a much higher level and being a little bit more consistent with some of the reads. And then the perimeter skill players blocking better as well, which I think was the biggest blockade for Achane runs in particular. So there's a pathway here, I think, for Achane. I think there's a good chance Bucky Irving stocks are going through to the moon. He's a very slippery player. I think there's a good chance that James Cook has another strong season. Now, he was ranked as high as 4th on somebody's list, which is a little surprising to me. And they said the quiet part out loud here with the stat that they included for James Cook. 3.1 yards per rush before contact was the 5th highest mark of any qualifying back. He got a lot of that offensive line does a lot of good work. And Cook's not like a big player, but he is an explosive runner. I think Achane's probably a little better in the passing game than James Cook, but Cook has had a better offensive line. And I think from a skill set perspective, and they're similar size guys too. I think if you flip-flopped Cook and Achane as far as teams, Cook would probably average 4 yards a carry, and Achane might average 5.5. So I could see him potentially passing James Cook someday, but that depends on where Cook continues to play. Does he continue to play in Buffalo after this year in a contract year? It's interesting. So I think 8, 9, 10 is a realistic place for Achane next year to land if things go right for him. Some of that is up to him and some of it is not. 13th, technically honorable mention. It's not a bad showing for Devon Achane going into his 3rd year in the NFL. That's going to do it for us here today on the show. So we went through Asante Samuel Sr., we went through Drew Rosenhaus on Darren Waller, and we went through Devon Achane as an honorable mention on the top 10 running backs in the NFL list, courtesy of ESPN, polling executives across the league. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.